Hey guys, welcome back to the Bench of Science. Okay, so what if I told you that these guys are idiots, you're an idiot, and so am I? Okay, I know that's kind of a strange way to start the video, but I promise it's gonna make sense. So I more or less want to start off with explaining why did I decide to do today's video. And that is more or less because of Jeff Nippard's latest study, where he compared himself to his brother. I know there's already a bunch of videos out there critiquing and giving their opinion, etc. From the moment I saw the study, I had my own critiques, which I was going to keep to myself. But then I couldn't really help myself when about a week ago, Jeff decided to release another video explaining his training methods, and he doubled down by using the data that he obtained from his own study. And then that's when I was like, okay, I've had enough. What if I told you those results were unreliable, useless? Okay, that might be an exaggeration. They definitely did provide some valuable insights, but I don't fully trust what we saw. And sure, I'm not the first person to say this, but today I want to give my own perspective as to why I say so. Okay, so we're going to start off with the most obvious points. Jeff and his brother decided they were going to use a DEXA scan.
You all think, oh, it's so accurate. It's within 1 or 2%. It's not even close.
Before I start bashing DEXA scans and telling you why I have beef with them, I need you to understand why DEXA scans are even around to begin with. DEXA scans more or less started being used in 1987. Not sure if that's when they were invented exactly, but research says 1987, that's when DEXA scans more or less popped on our radar. DEXA scans are often quoted to be the gold standard for measuring body composition and so on and so forth. However, this is very misleading and a big misconception amongst many people out there. DEXA scans are considered to be the gold standard, don't get me wrong, but they're the gold standard for bone, more specifically bone mineral density, not body composition. They were never designed for body composition to begin with. That was a secondary factor that was considered. The most important thing when DEXA scans were created or initially used was to detect bone mineral density.
The inability to accurately detect changes over time calls into question its use in clinical trials.
You often hear a lot of DEXA supporters or DEXA enthusiasts saying, no, but DEXA scans are really accurate. They have a 0.99 correlation with CT scans. And to that, I have to say, no, that is correct. That is very true. But that does not mean that they give out the same result. And you might find that to be strange. Like, oh, dude, are you really going to fight over 0.01? And that's not what I'm arguing here. What I'm arguing is that 0.99 correlation does not mean that they both give out the same values. In fact, it has been observed that more often than not, DEXA seems to underestimate the amount of body fat that an individual has and seems to overestimate the amount of muscle that they've gained. And you might be wondering why that is. There's actually a number of reasons for this. DEXA scans can be manipulated by the clothing type that an individual wears. DEXA scans are also known to be less sensitive the larger the individual is and or the more body fat that they carry. The next flaw with DEXA is that DEXA can be manipulated by the type of clothing that you wear. And I mean even the most minute details. The thickness of the clothing is a factor, the material type, whether it has a zipper or not. There's so many different things that could be different from one piece of fabric versus another that completely skews the results of DEXA. The final point I want to mention is water. So this is often quoted by a lot of people. You can just drink a bunch of water and DEXA will automatically attribute that to muscle. And you might be wondering why. And this is because DEXA scans typically assume that an individual has a hydration level of 73%, whereas the range actually sits somewhere closer to 67 and or 85%. So if you really wanted to cheat a DEXA scan, you could just drink a bunch of water and anything above 73%, Dexter's just gonna be like, yep, checks out. This man gained extra muscle. Another fun little detail that I noticed that nobody else seems to really speak about is when you look at the ultrasound results, where Jeff talks about the thickness of their muscles. Jeff correctly talks about how his legs more or less remained the same after his injury, and he gained an extra bit of muscle on his biceps, which is really cool, makes sense, checks out. But he seems to glance over his brother's results, interestingly enough. If you carefully look at the charts, you can see that his quads grew by quite a bit, which is definitely there, and you can see that in the picture. However, if you look at Jeff's brother's bicep, that's where things get a bit strange. It says over an entire year and 2 months, while being trained by Jeff Nippard, a champion bodybuilder and powerlifter, his biceps stayed the same. I'm sorry, I'm finding that hard to believe. So you might be wondering, Mr. Know It All, what do you think they should have done instead? Well, since we all more or less know, and we've known for quite the while that DEXA is not the most accurate when it comes to body composition, I would have preferred to see Jeff use an MRI scanner and at least acknowledge why they decided not to use it. And yes, I know MRIs are not cheap, they're not found everywhere, and you need somebody that's really skilled at using it. However, when you go to the university's website, McMaster's University in this case, and they have at least 102 different individuals in the staff that are more or less trained in that department. How many specifically can use the MRI? I'm not sure. But there's at least 10% of them, I'm assuming, could use it. That is an assumption, I'll admit. Not perfect. And the final point that I want to mention is that when you go to the website, it actually shows you can book the MRI if you wanted to. It's available from 6:30 in the morning to about 10:30 at night, 7 days a week. So it just would be really interesting to find out why Jeff didn't use the MRI. Next up, I would have preferred to see more control when it comes to the clothing that Jeff and his brother decided to use. I know this sounds like a really weird point to mention, but as we've stated earlier, DEXA scans are really sensitive to the clothing that individuals wearing down to the smallest detail. And throughout the video, I'm not sure who else picked up on this, but Jeff and his brother seem to be changing the pants that they wear, not just between scans, but also between the initial picture and the initial scan, making me wonder, did the initial scan and initial posing photo happen on the same day, different days? Just a really weird detail I noticed. If you have an answer to this, I would really like you to leave a comment below because I'm genuinely interested in understanding why they glanced over the muscle thickness when it came to Jeff's brother, whereas Jeff decided to highlight his muscle thickness. Maybe my understanding is not complete on that piece of data, but I find it really interesting that Jeff's brother gained zero biceps over an entire year as a newbie. It just doesn't make sense to me. Finally, I want to talk about the in-body scan that Jeff decided to use. Why? So you might be wondering, why am I bashing Jeff so much? And that's because I hold him to a higher level than the average Joe. Consider this. At the time that you're seeing this video, Jeff Nippard has about 7 million subscribers, 4 million people that saw that video. That's a lot of individuals that are listening to what Jeff is saying. And sure, the vast majority of them are probably people within the gym community that want to know more, that want to better themselves. But there's always going to be a percentage that doesn't know better and needs to be educated on the topic. We also need to remember the fact that Jeff has been lifting for 15 years plus. He's less likely to gain a significant amount of muscle in comparison to his brother. And this is one more area where DEXA seems to struggle with longitudinal studies, where there might be smaller margins of muscle gain or fat loss. Okay, so you might be wondering, why did I call everybody an idiot at the start of this video? You said it was gonna make sense. And that's actually the last point that I want to make to wrap up this video perfectly. I can't remember the name of the creator, but I'll definitely link his video below. Funny enough, I found his video right before shooting this video. Like, the last video that I watched was this one. And he more or less explains that after a certain point of creating models and ideas and ways of thinking, intellectuals tend to become idiots. And by that, he means once they have a certain understanding of how things are supposed to work, they're more likely to not want to deviate from that idea or to skew away. They think anything else has to be an error or an exception to the rule. A good portion of really smart individuals who've been in the fitness community for many years actually rely on DEX as well, and they believe it to be as accurate as it can be because this is the narrative that has been pushed over and over and over again.
So I actually got DEXA scanned a couple of years ago, and I was sitting around 187 pounds. And my total body fat percentage came out to 11.3%. Now, DEXAs are the gold standard when it comes to measuring body fat. However, we can't say that they are 100% accurate, but we can say that it puts us in the right ballpark.
This is not to say that there is a perfect method out there. Even MRIs have errors of their own. It's just to remind us that we need to sometimes question the results that are put in front of us. We need to question the data. Don't just blindly believe what is told to you. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again for the next. Peace out.